Welcome. You are at Building Resilience, Greening, Heat, and Urban Trees. Before we do anything else, we have a question for each of you in the audience that we want to ask you to type your answer into the chat. How have outdoor plants and trees made your life better? Think about how your everyday experiences and also your life as a whole would be different if we didn't have neighborhood parks and preserves and shade trees and plants along creeks and the coast and bike and walking paths and vegetation. How have outdoor plants and trees made your life better? And while you guys are all answering that, I'm just going to do a little intro here. My name is Carrie Whittinger with Sonoma State University's Center for Environmental Inquiry, and I will be your technical support today. So if at any time you have a problem, just send me a private chat message. The agenda for today includes a short introduction by the Center for Environmental Inquiry, followed by a panel discussion. Next, we will get input from audience members who'd like to share, then quick feedback from all of you via the chat before returning to the panel for some final thoughts. Technical guidelines for this workshop. This is a Zoom meeting, not a webinar, and as such, you all have control over your own video and audio. So please keep yourself muted, except during the discussion part, where we highly recommend that you speak up out loud. You can use the chat as much as you'd like for questions, comments, technical help throughout the entire event. This event is being recorded. Please take a moment to type your full name and affiliation into the chat right now. This is our sign-in sheet for the day, so we really appreciate if you would do that. All right, this is our fourth lunch in the North Bay Ford's Building Resilience series, a year-long conversation focused on ways we can work together to build resilience to climate change in our region. For those of you who may be new, North Bay Forward discussions are focused on ways to increase collaboration that enhances sustainability and resilience. We invite speakers to highlight best practices in the region and then discuss ways to best support or expand on these efforts. If you'd like to be involved in planning these events, please send an email our way. We'd like to thank the Regional Resilience Working Group of the SSU President's Sustainability Advisory Group for helping to plan and host this event, many of whom are here today. Now, I would like to turn it over to Kristin Cushman, co-founder and CEO of EcoShift Consulting. She will give us a little background on what greening is and how urban trees can be used to mitigate the heat impacts of climate change, introduce our speakers, and moderate the discussion.
Thank you very much. Nice to see all of you. I'm hoping that some of you are return folks. We do this every fourth Wednesday. So today we are going to talk about urban greening. First, I'd like to just say that this is an important part of Sonoma State University's climate action planning process. EcoShift is helping the campus with that plan. And that's why I'm participating as a moderator in today. So the SSU Climate Action Plan will include not only actions to achieve carbon neutrality, but also will find ways that SSU can work with other organizations to build resilience on climate events. Specifically, our plan will target more native landscaping on campus, as well as carbon sequestration initiatives at the local preserves. And so through this lunch series, we're hoping to discover opportunities for how our campus can expand our impact regionally. And the first step to that is learning about what various agencies and nonprofits are working on regionally. So we'd like all of you to consider how you can contribute, what your organization is doing and how it might fit into the overall planning process. So climate projections showing increased flood, fire, drought, and heat waves are unfortunately becoming true and are part of a new normal that we have to deal with. So through the series, we're hosting conversations surrounding what we need to do to integrate this new normal into our planning and preparedness. So again, today we're talking about urban greening, and we have some panelists with us today to talk about some of the approaches that specific agencies and municipalities are taking to add greening elements into their community planning. So define urban greening. There's lots of ways to define urban greening, but in a nutshell, It includes initiatives such as creating new parks, restoring green spaces that offer shade and a place for residents to gather and hang out. It involves initiatives such as planting native trees and plants. They're now being considered communities, assets that can help cool down neighborhoods, decrease the amount of energy that we need to generate in our homes, improve bike and pedestrian pathways, and potentially add not only more quality of life, but more value to our homes. And so the three panelists today each bring a unique lens on urban greening. And so I want to introduce one at a time. And then once I introduce the panelists, I'm going to ask each of them a question, and then we'll bring it to the broader audience after that. So the first speaker panelist I would like to introduce is John Shribbs, who will be talking about broad community benefits of urban greening. Ben Fordham will speak about the challenges and considerations that cities face in coming up with urban greening initiatives. And Steve Swain will address what is defined as assisted mitigation, which is a look at kind of the scientific benefits of urban greening. So first, John Shribbs, he's our first panelist. He brings a wealth of knowledge to this subject, and he's involved with a number of initiatives, including Releaf Petaluma and the Petaluma Wetlands Alliance. I think there are maybe 6 to 8 organizations that John is involved with. So Carrie, if you can put the links for those organizations that John's involved with into the chat, I think given the time that we have today, people can go to the websites if they want to learn more. Or John, you can point out specifics as you're answering my first question. So the first question for you, John, is can you spend 5 minutes talking about the work that you're doing with the city and the specific benefits that Petaluma has seen as a result of its greening effort? And yesterday when we did some prep, you listed a bunch of really significant benefits, and I would love to just have you give an overview of those.
Okay, so we're still at the beginning of this process of our greening of our city, and but it's been a long process already, just setting up all the groundwork to make what's currently happening now. And of course, there's lots, as you said, the benefits first of just having trees in and around your town. The more canopy you have, turns out, besides heat, reducing the heat island effect, which can be up to 10%, because we know that from both LA area research and then up in the heat wave we had up in Oregon, that not only is it just general heat that's reduced, but also health is involved, because a lot of folks that came out of Oregon, the heat created a lot of hospitalizations from heat exhaustion and dryness. So just the heat island effect is one major factor that we're looking at today, but there's lots of other benefits of the trees. You slow down traffic. You have fewer accidents when the streets are lined with trees. You have a psychological benefits of, like, we have that nature deficit going on, and just having more trees and more wildlife around is actually comforting to people psychologically and socially, and brings people together. There's more people out walking in nature. It improves our physical health by going out there. The trees provide the oxygen. They reduce the pollution. We just had 900 trees removed from our freeway expansion. 900 redwood trees got removed. So we're trying to get those somehow mitigated from the highway department. So there's, and besides all the wildlife, basically in native trees, you want to grow as many insects and birds. Turns out it's not just the cats that are eating the birds and chasing down the birds, but it's actually lack of food. And a lot of research has come out of that, especially if there's someone that's back, Doug Tamley over on the East Coast has done a lot of research and provided the biodiversity requirements that native trees are absolutely essential. You have to have so many minimum native trees that are food source year round to make that all happen. So that all provides a basis. And besides, you have the just the oxygen production and pollution effect from the trees, huge benefits all along, especially along freeways and especially in the, and we're targeting the underserved areas of town here next for increasing parks and increasing our canopy. So we've started these concepts, and we've got finally at a point we have agreement with the city, agreement with the parks, agreement. We have a climate action committee that started several years ago on its own. And then the city 2 years ago said, yeah, let's change our goals. So we started that process, and now we're in a general planning, 20-year general plan. And the environmentalists have come out of the woodwork, and we've got lots of folks that are pushing the concept. All the whole green agenda is being pushed now to make it our 20-year goal. And we've canned gas stations, no more gas stations in town. We were the first in the nation in Petaluma here, no more gas stations. So we have a huge following, a very green, progressive city that is just trying to be a leader right now in the whole movement, reducing, changing transportation, bicycle lanes and bicycle paths with trees around it. And the city engineers are into it. We're actually getting the staff of the city supporting all these concepts now, making us move forward. So that's a quick summary.
Yeah, that's great. And I just have one follow-up question. Do you see an increase in bike ridership and people walking around? Does your community have a sense, a different culture now that this is a priority?
As I said, it's just starting. We're doing changing our streets and our streets, calling smart streets and reduced traffic and road diet type. We've already started that process. And to make them more safer. And we have a huge bicycle and pedestrian crew that's trying to make our bicycle path. So the concepts are there. We're pushing hard to get financing and budgets to improve all our bike paths, because research from Europe and other places have shown if you make up bike paths and pedestrian paths and put trees on either side to shade it, people will start walking and riding more frequently. And that's essential to make that happen. So we're pushing hard now politically to make that happen. And as we finally reached, I think we reached the tipping point, making it start to actually happen. We're writing out grants. We have a $30,000 grant from Releaf of Petaluma that just came in to plant 140 trees in our park. In one park that has green or gray water to supplement, because we're not allowed to plant without gray water. And then, and we have 2 more parks we just applied to, and also Cal Fire. We just applied for a $250,000 grant to redo our master plan for our whole urban canopy around the whole city, which is done. And close to follow. San Jose is leading on this. Look at San Jose, what they're doing. It's phenomenal. They got $1 million grant to do this.
Great. And I see there's a lot of questions or comments coming into the chat, and we will review those here in a minute. Lots of them are on the funding aspect. So that's something that we could also send out post event as a resource for folks. I wanted to move to the second panelist, Ben Fordham. He has been the lead consultant on the City of Los Altos's climate action and adaptation plan. And I thought he could bring some perspective on some of the challenges and some of the solutions that the city kind of wrestled with as they were committing to their urban greening program. So Ben, your question is, could you also spend 5 minutes talking about, again, the challenge, potential solutions, people that were involved in the discussion with the City of Los Altos?
Yeah, definitely. Thanks, Kristin, and thanks to everybody for being here today. As Chris, is my volume working okay?
Yes, I can hear you.
Okay, great. Thank you. I wasn't sure. So yeah, just happy to be here today and share a little bit about the City of Los Altos's climate action and adaptation plan update, specifically around some of the urban greening initiatives that we looked at, and some of the challenges and potential solutions there. I think I wanted to just start by just explaining a couple of the goals that the city is establishing. So they have set a goal of at least 10,000 new city trees by 2035, which includes kind of some urban forest concepts and things like that. They also have goals around green transit commute amenities, so creating shade trees and green landscapes to help make walking, biking, and taking transit more attractive to everybody in the community. And then there's also some community carbon farming partnerships for pilot programs that they're looking at as well. So that's kind of a snapshot of what is in the plan. And a couple of the challenges that came up along the way through stakeholder engagement and from the community. that the city is kind of working through are just the increased water use that would come along with increased, increasing the number of trees, and additionally, some of the costs associated with the planting and maintenance of the trees. And like Kristin said, I'll get into some of the potential solutions for these in a moment. And then one other thing that came up that we had a lot of conversation about was who'd be responsible for maintaining the trees, whether that be the citizens or the city. Should the city take on that responsibility? That was another thing that we had a lot of discussion about. And just in terms of who was involved in that discussion, we had a really robust stakeholder engagement process for the CAP, and we had a lot of really great participation throughout that process. But I guess I would say really the CAP project itself has been driven by the Los Altos Environmental Commission, which is a citizen-led committee. They've been really active along the way. And then we also had a lot of involvement from different community groups. So Greentown Los Altos was one of kind of the most active groups, but we also had engagement from high school students, the business community, really across the board, and of course the different city departments that will be responsible for implementing the plan. And just a little bit about some of the potential solutions and some of the benefits that the city expects to see from implementing the plan. One of the first solutions that we're including in the plan is the city, we're recommending that the city update their urban forest management plan. The city of Palo Alto recently updated their plan, and the city felt like it was a really progressive plan and a good template that they wanted to use to really help decide, number of trees, where the tree should go, types of trees, things like that. In terms of some of the costs and how to offset those, there's lots of potential funding sources out there. I think John mentioned Releaf is a good one that the city's looking into, and there's a number of other ones. The city's also looking at different partnerships with citizen groups, nonprofits, and things like that to help with some partnership opportunities. The city's looking at improved, part of the plan is improved green infrastructure on water. So rainwater harvesting, gray water harvesting, those types of solutions to help with the water use. And then the last one is just city provided funding. So the city is prepared to provide funding if other funding sources are not available. And just a little bit about some of the benefits. I mean, I think John touched on a lot of really great ones, but reduced energy use through shading, reduced need for air conditioning in the summer, reduced vehicle miles traveled through, again, just making walking, biking, taking transit more attractive. And within the city, and I think even globally, transportation is one of the largest, if not the largest source of emissions. The city is hoping to sequester over 500 metric tons of carbon dioxide in 2035 through tree planting. And then again, as John mentioned, just the increase in human health and wellness, folks getting out and exercising more, cleaner air to breathe. And then the last one is just increased social connectivity. So science, studies have proven that folks are more apt to kind of get together and congregate in areas that are greener, have trees, and it just kind of helps bring that social fabric together. So I'll probably leave it at that and just close with saying that there's definitely challenges, but there's lots of benefits to urban greening that are well recognized within Los Altos and are a really vital part of the plan.
Yeah, thank you, Ben. And I did hear a lot of similarities between you and John. I heard the recycle water, I heard grants, I heard maintenance, etc. So one question for you, a follow-up question, Ben, is I'm familiar with the City of Los Altos's plan. It's not yet been approved, so we can't send it out in the chat. However, you do have a list of lots of the grant programs. I'm sure, John, you do too. It would be interesting to know if people would be interested in a resource page like that. I think the object of our discussion today is, how can we all collaborate together? How can we lean on each other? And if grant funding is definitely something that would be helpful for those folks in the audience, I think that might be a good next step for the meeting. All right, Steve, we're going, thank you, Ben. We're gonna move to Steve. We're right on time, so I'm excited. I hope the audience get ready. I'm gonna ask you a question after we hear from Steve. But Steve Swain is the Environmental Horticulture Advisor for UC Cooperative Extension, Marin and Sonoma counties. So thank you, Stephen, for being here. Could you spend 5 minutes talking about the definition of assisted migration, how this might affect heat and drought, and then I know you have a lot of very in-depth scientific knowledge. If you could speak to urban greening with a scientific lens. Thank you.
Sounds good. Okay, let's. Now I'm unmuted. Assisted migration is, somebody brought it up in the chat already. Planting trees is a really good idea from a lot of different points of view, but the trees have to be the right trees for the location that we're concerned with. And unfortunately for us, because the climate's changing, even some of the trees that grow here right now are not going to be the ideal trees or plants in general. I'm going to talk about trees because they're the big expensive thing to move. They're the big expensive thing to have grow. We can put in petunias, we can grow grass fairly easily. The trees take decades. So that's where the big concern here is. And assisted migration is about moving plant species that are appropriate for the climate as it's going to be, at least as best guess is going to be, in about 20 years or 30 years or 40 years, depending upon your window, so that they're surviving. For instance, we talked about all those redwoods that got removed from along the freeways. Well, if you noticed, a lot of those redwoods that were removed, trees that were removed along the freeways, a lot of them were redwoods, and a lot of them were really not doing well. And that's because the climate has been changing already. So we don't want Caltrans to put in 900 more redwood trees, because a redwood tree dying on the side of the road isn't sequestering much carbon. It's not doing anybody a whole lot of good. So assisted migration is talking about, okay, so what trees can we look at as a proxy for someplace down south that'll do reasonably well here? And I don't have time to go into the long lists, but there's a lot of work being done on this. But if you look at the native trees, Marin is projected to be, in about 40, 50 years, a climate similar to San Luis Obispo. And if we're going to shift that far south, we need to be looking at the plant palette that San Luis Obispo has and thrives there, to be considering what we're going to be planting up here so that our tree plantings will be successful in the urban environment. And this allows for all kinds of other things. We were talking about wildlife corridors. The creatures that are going to be moving north, they're going to have to move north. A lot of birds and things like that are going to need trees that they can find that are familiar habitat. And so basically we're planting the trees and creating the habitat for allowing the creatures to move north. This works fine for birds, doesn't work so well for salamanders. So we might be talking about assisted migration for salamanders in some instances, that kind of thing. The other thing I want to point out about trees fairly briefly is that if you really want to have an impact on climate and mitigation, placement is absolutely critical, especially when we talk about residential settings. You'll read on the web, on a number of different websites, I've run it, it's even on a few UC websites, that the south aspect is the best place to plant the tree. And that's probably wrong. Now, the reason I say probably is because every housing situation is different. Everybody has different access to the sun. There may be situations where planting on the south side is appropriate, but think about this just briefly. Where is the sun in midsummer if you have a big evergreen tree, it's shining almost directly overhead. That means that tree has to be practically on top of your house to provide shade. And that's not where you really want a tree. Typically, you don't want it on top of the house. Maybe, maybe not, depending upon. But if it's, especially if it's an evergreen tree like a coast live oak, that tree on the south side of the house is going to cast a huge shadow midwinter. So it's not going to provide you much in the way of summer cooling unless it's on top of your house. And it's guaranteed to provide a whole bunch of cold in the winter when you need heat. So you should not be planting evergreens on the south side of your house. If you want to plant evergreens, they generally are going to be on the west side of the house to prevent wind, to provide wind blockage. And we can go into all kinds of questions like this. But generally speaking, if you're going to plant deciduous trees, the east side of the house is the best place. You'll get some sun even in the winter. It'll help warm your house up. And in the summer, it'll provide cooling through most of the morning. The west side is the best place to put them in the afternoons. So those are a couple of the different topics. There's a lot of things to discuss. Assisted migration is how we can sort of act locally to help provide resilience for our communities writ large, to keep the wildlife and our ecosystems functioning. And how we can do this on a personal, private level is really paying attention and being thoughtful about how we put trees in around the house. Because honestly, those trees are only going to provide you with a little bit of carbon capture. They'll provide, where those trees really make the huge difference is in the heating and cooling benefits, which are 20% a year, which is a massive amount. It's more than 40 trees are going to be able to provide you with a typical home in a year. So that's where you can make a big difference in carbon and the climate. And I'll leave it at that.
Okay, thank you. That's things I don't think about every day. So thank you for that. Could you talk a little bit as a follow-up around the water issue, groundwater, recycled water? Is there a connection between, is there a proper approach to dealing with the water, additional water needs?
Recycled water is a great idea. The practicalities of recycled water get complicated, mostly because it's pretty much, it's very, very expensive to remove all the salts from water. And if you keep using salty water over and over time, you will eventually start destroying your soil. So you can put some recycled water in, particularly if you're in a bad drought year like we had last year. Recycled water can be a godsend if you've got a truck that'll come out and can deliver water. But you don't want to be on that every summer for 20 or 30 years. It'll start having negative consequences for you. But one of the reasons we want to stick with natives, particularly drought-adapted natives from a little bit farther south, is they're going to be the thriftiest water users, and they're going to be able to handle the high temperatures that we're expecting. So they're going to be able to do the most with the least amount of water. And since every carbon dioxide molecule that is photosynthesized is linked to one water molecule that you're providing. So without water, no carbon capture is occurring. That's, it's pretty six water molecules plus 6 carbon dioxide molecules makes 1 6 carbon sugar plus 6 oxygen. It's down to simple math. No water, no carbon sequestration. Did I help at all, or did I just confuse everybody?
Sorry, I had muted myself because there was a motorcycle going by. No, thank you for that. It's, I think that it will be an ongoing challenge for cities, definitely the broader cities, working at a municipal level to address the additional water needs. I think from a residential perspective, I think those are fairly simple or easier to kind of tackle. So thank you for that. I wanted to move into another round of questions, and I was going to ask the audience a question first, but I think I want to ask John his next question first, because I think then while John is talking, the follow-up question to everyone listening in is, what do you think the most important thing is to addressing greening, heat, and urban trees? How can you all participate, or what do you think is the next steps in terms of issues that we can tackle together? one of the reasons, as I mentioned earlier, is for this series is we'd love to collaborate more regionally. There's a lot of people out there working on these same issues, and I think coming together and sharing knowledge and best practices is definitely something that strengthens the inner core of these programs. So what could you all contribute? What would you all need? How can we help? How can SSU specifically help? That is going to be the question. I guess I just asked it. So with that, while you're typing your answer, John, I wanted you to talk. I was very impressed with learning about the work that you're doing and how you're able to, get everyone on board, pulling all of these nonprofits together, working on programs that overlap across the city, across, Watershed Alliance territory. Can you talk a little bit about how all of these organizations that you're involved with, how they work together, how that came to be?
Yeah, thank you. Well, I'm here in Petaluma, as I said, is fairly, which has had a strong progressive environmental movement here for a long time. And a lot of the folks do know each other already. So I'm stepping in a place that already has a lot of action. So things that I think you're referring to, what can we do individually to move forward to get things done? And so 6 years ago, I joined the tree advisory committee to the city. So we get to review that and the policies of the city. And so I rewrote the tree technical manual. And then right now we're looking at tree ordinances. Our city allows too many trees to be removed without protections, without remediation. So questioning the planning department of your city for tree ordinances and how its policies are, and talking to city council and getting that changed, getting that little policy, that small little thing, not just native, but especially native trees protected. That's one thing. Another thing is we have Cool Cities, which is a movement here in the state. We just got $1 million grant from Cool Cities to run what's called basically captains, block captains. So I'm going to be a block captain, and this can be done with or without this grant. You can do it on your own, be a block captain and even a tree steward for your neighborhood. And basically you get together for 8 weeks, talk, have a little coffee clatch and get together and say, okay, how can we deal with climate change and greening, and gather some information, and you do a little research and come back. There's lots of information out there. I've pulled together a page for Petaluma Wetlands Alliance. I've got a web page also for Releaf Petaluma. It started 1 year ago. 2 people started 2 years ago, started talking to people around town. I got invited in. I'm now part of the leadership, and we're pushing forward. And we just got a $30,000 grant to plant 140 trees. Just started 1 year ago to make that happen. So that's another thing you can get doing. Lots of little things that you can do yourself. As I said, Stephen, I think one of the questions I have for Stephen would be the Master Gardener Program advising. I tried to reach out to them, and they're into vegetables and gardening and landscape, not so much trees. And so, Stephen, if you could help nudge the Master Gardeners throughout the entire state to really focus in on trees and get some tree stewards through that program to help do things like that. And then we have someone to call on and research sites. Releaf Petaluma, California Releaf has a wonderful site to go to for just tree species and actions, how to do that, how to get started in your neighborhood, what to do. And they're very helpful. They've been very helpful to us in getting started with this our first grant, and we just got it. Cal Fire has grants out there. Other places to go. Go look at, I mentioned San Jose. Palo Alto has been mentioned as strong leaders for the last 30, 40 years for doing this, for working for tree stewardship. We're looking at cement, and I saw question about cement and trees and native trees. And yeah, I just talked to the city manager, parks manager today, and in our theater district, they're going to have to remove an oak tree that's doing sidewalks because they got sued because the sidewalk, and someone tripped on the sidewalk, and so they're suing the business because of this oak tree that has lifted the sidewalk up. And so, yeah, so he said, we're gonna have to remove it and replace it with a smaller tree. But there's tree lists out there. We have it on our site now under Cool Cities. We have a list of species for our city, but you need to work with that. And hopefully if Stephen and other UC Extension horticulturists can help with your local area, come up with trees for yours. We're looking at another website to look at, Oaktopia. Oaktopia is, someone did their own descriptions of all the oaks that are possible in California. It has lots of lists, especially Southern California, Mexican oak species that are very similar, because you have sudden oak death, you have different oaks, bringing those in. Look at that site for what you can plant and where to plant things. Those are just, I'll just throw out these ideas for you.
Yeah, that's great. I am looking at the chat, and I think there's someone here from the county of Sonoma. Is there someone in here that wanted to add something about the county of Sonoma to your point, John? Doug, is that you?
Hey there. Yeah, I'm an
Hi,
SSU
Doug.
graduate, and
Okay.
I work for the county of Sonoma. I went through the geography program at SSU, graduated in 2010, I think. But yeah, I work for the county of Sonoma. I'm in the long range planning division. And one of the things that was discussed when I applied for this job several years ago was that the county wanted to do something about trees. And that was a pretty loose description, but essentially we had enough notable cases of trees being removed in open space and private property for vineyards and things that there was enough public outcry over the last 10 years or so that the board of supervisors said, we want to make this priority. We want to see something change. We want to see things move forward. So I've been lucky enough to be tasked with that. So one thing that we did, I'll just be quick here, but we wanted to start by saying, what do we have now? You know, what are our policies? What have we said that we hope to achieve? What are we actually achieving? Do we define our objectives clearly enough so that we can measure them? In most cases, no. But we're looking at, like, of all the different tree species and urban rural issues, and like where can we affect the most change, get the most bang for our buck, find the lowest hanging fruit. And what we concluded was that focusing on oaks and oak woodlands would be one way to do that. So that's where we're heading in the county. And we've been directed by the board to basically come up with a new ordinance, new regulations for the unincorporated areas of Sonoma to emphasize oak protection. Right now, there's very little prohibition on removal of trees. Even in our Valley Oak ordinance, we discovered that it only applies to 20% of the Valley Oaks in the county, and that was not something we knew before. So by going through this process and trying to be explicit about, well, what does the county want to achieve? What are we doing now? And asking these big questions and looking at it from a holistic perspective, I think we've come to some conclusions that there's a lot of room for improvement. And I'm excited to be working on the project. And so I'm just glad that we're having this conversation here, and I just want to express my gratitude for it.
Yeah, thank you for chiming in. Anyone else, excuse me, anyone else want to pop in while we're having an open discussion? Anything else that people are working on that they might want to share, or things that issues that we might want to address and prioritize?
Yeah, I think Doug mentioned some water issues, especially salt and soap. I saw that in the chat also.
Okay.
So using gray water, because I've used a lot of gray water to water plants in pots to keep my really best ornamental going over this last summer. And also I ran a native plant nursery for 10 years and got on recycled water. And so I used recycled water 100% on trees in pots for several years, 2 years in a row, and had no real issues in those pots. And I would say even once they're in the ground, yes, there is some salts, but a lot of those salts are a lot of nitrogen and phosphorus, which trees love, and you get better growth, but you have to watch out for total salt. But with the amount of rains we have, especially here in this area, we have like 25 plus in an average year, not this last year, but maybe this year we'll get 25 full inches. That the rainwater will pretty much does leach that salt down deep enough so that if you limit the amount of water that you use for irrigation, even if it has the salts in it from recycled water, is for most trees should be okay. There will be research that says no, but I think on a practical basis with our soils up here, probably I would not be that concerned about it.
Okay, thank you. Stephen, do you want to comment on both what Doug and John have just said in terms of, I think you've already commented on the water, but let's talk about the oak trees. I know that you're an expert in sudden oak death. Does that play a role in urban greening? Do you see that being a liability? Can you just speak to that?
I'm not positive. Oaks are good. Most of our oaks are pretty good sized. So, we're not talking street trees here typically. Most of the time you need some space. And there are some smaller oaks that can be pruned into these things. And I don't think sudden oak death really plays a major role in how we're managing trees in the city. And I know you can come up with instances where people do have issues. But for the most part, sudden oak death doesn't go from oak to oak to oak. It goes from bay laurel to bay laurel to bay laurel to rhododendron and a few other things. And if it happens to get on an oak along the way, it can kill that oak. So I think sudden oak death is a little bit of a distraction here. To me, the big issue, I saw a number of people talking about trees in pots along freeways because you could maybe get past certain environmental reporting requirements and those kinds of things, CEQA. And trees and salts aren't going to be a big deal in the short term, like the 2 to 3 year window. And absolutely, rain will leach it out if you're on sandy soils. If you're on clay, like you are in a lot of Marin, and you do this over time, it will take a while for those salts to build up in the soils. It will take more than 2 to 3 years. It'll take 5 or 10. But once it's in there, you're done. I would encourage people to be pretty critical about how they're doing it and know your soil. It's all going to depend on exactly where you are and where your house is.
Thank you. Ben, I have a question for you then as a follow-up to that. Does this city of Los Altos, you said that they were considering recycled water. Has there been a percentage put on that? Has this been part of the discussion, or is this something that may not be well known?
Yeah, good question. I guess the city has established a target of 15% reduction in overall water use within the city by 2035. I think that's the only real target that they have right now. I think they still have to flesh some things out, but they have identified a number of incentives available for green infrastructure.
Okay, great. And are those listed in the plan as well, if we were to put out a kind of a resource page?
They are, yeah. We could definitely provide this to folks.
Okay. Well, I want to just circle back and just say that, Sonoma State is working on their climate action plan. I think beyond the planning process, I think in a general sense, Sonoma would like to find pathways to support regional efforts. And so one of the ways we can support that is through our student internships, through research, through our preserves. So of any of the panelists or anyone else on the call, are there things that, ways that Sonoma State could support you all? Are there examples of other internship programs that have proven success that we could maybe mimic? And I'll pass that to, unless someone wants to pop up from the audience. Anyone? Going. Then I'm going to pass it to John. Do you know of any examples of university support on these types of programs that have proved relevant?
Yeah, there's plenty of opportunities for interns in both actual work and then support. I've seen just even for interns that just like need hours of to fill volunteer time and expectations. So coming out and doing actual work in the parks areas I've had like one thing I have is like I work with Eagle Scouts and do lots of projects with Eagle Scouts, and some of them have been planting trees. So getting interns to lead in doing small little projects like that and get funded, it'd be really nice. Like I help out with the parks here because I'm involved with Cindy Chong and the park system. So there's lots of, I try to keep my back pocket several projects available. So when either an Eagle Scout or like a college student needs a project to do for a senior project, or a high school student for a senior project to do.
What about something
It'd be nice
broader
for-
than that? How about
Broader than that is creatively.
let me
Need
Sorry.
help with development of nonprofits. There's a huge need for outreach for the Hispanic community. That's a huge need right now. We need to have students who are bilingual to go around the community and just talk to the community in various ways and ask the right questions and provide answers, doing surveys and the like. The webpage development, supporting staff with writing brochures, writing small articles even to support, to get it on the webpage, content for web pages. So it's both science and getting interns to do these things to support all the nonprofits, because we're so limited in people, and most of our volunteers, they're 70 years plus. So, and they're not technology oriented. So getting help to do all of that, mass media, how do we use mass media to get our issues out?
What about, what about research?
And research, if they are scientifically required research project, like we have 140 trees going out. If they could actually study these trees every year and look at growth patterns and then look at do the testing and put their senior project as a college. I don't know if you have requirements at Sonoma State for these, like I did when I went through college. I was required to do a project before I finished.
Right.
I know Sonoma, San Luis Obispo does the same thing, requires a project.
Right.
Yeah, so that, if they could actually do something and research it and come back and gather that data over 2-3 years and say, hey, here's what's happened, even if it's community outreach project, a tree study project.
Right. Well, thank you for that. So moving forward, then I will broaden the conversation today and say that, this North Bay Forward series is monthly, obviously. And we are going to continue to look for ways to build communication. And if you all have ideas for ways that this lunch series can continue to support you in your efforts, I think today I came away with maybe some grant, resource page that could be a really relevant outcome from this series. So if you all have ideas that things that you might want to see in the future in terms of resources or content, subject matter, please let us know, because we are really trying to find ways to keep the glue together, and that's what makes a really strong community. So with that,
Kristin, can I jump in really quick and just, I know that some of the people might not want to be speaking out loud necessarily, but we got some pretty great responses from just the very first question. And then seeing how people have, evolved with their answers afterwards. I thought it was amazing. The audience we have is clearly already pretty informed about this, because when we asked how would your everyday experiences in life as a whole be different if we didn't have outdoor plants and trees? A lot of people mentioned heat and shade. Clearly, that's the name of the event here. But we also had a lot about emotional well-being, people talking about inspiration, joy, calming, grounding, connection to nature. Multiple people mentioned clean air, which is something we really didn't talk about too much right now. We also have encouraging exercise, got brought up by a couple people, keeping us all healthy by encouraging us to go outside, because paths that have vegetation are more attractive. The beauty, of course, and biodiversity. People mentioned their gardens, mentioned supporting wildlife. So I kind of am interested if anybody has any different answers now that we've gone through this.
I have one.
Yeah.
Well, I want to pose the opposite question, which is, can you imagine a life without vegetation? I mean, let's just take a moment of silence and think about that. we would all be living completely different lives. Well, we wouldn't actually be here if there are no trees. So, well, thank you for that. Anyone else want to jump in and ask a question to one of our panelists? We have a few minutes left.
I see Claudia raised her hand.
Claudia, yes.
Yeah, I was really curious about the work that Doug was doing with the county, and I understand it's sort of ordinance directed, but I wanted to sort of understand the scope of your goals with that project. Does that include things like minimizing heat islands and biodiversity? And I mean, what is the extent of your goals with regards to trees?
Good question. I think one of our struggles, or one of the first goals of the project, was to get to a point where we had less questions of why trees, to where there was more of a broader understanding of, okay, we have a common understanding and agreement that this is important. So then I feel like we've set up the conversation to then be about, well, in what cases are trees a problem? So we can start from a place of saying, well, there's innumerable benefits from trees. So when are they actually a liability? When are they a problem, whether it's for sidewalks or infrastructure or, that sort of thing. So we are still working toward maybe defining some measurable goals that we can work toward, because I'd like to see this work into an adaptive kind of management framework where we can come back and we can report and we can understand maybe how canopy is changing over time. We are trying to establish a baseline and an understanding of where oaks are today, in and out of areas that have been affected by wildfire. So that's an important component, trying to set a baseline. And then hopefully, as we work toward more regular, like satellite data inputs over time, we can check back and say, how have we progressed over time? But it can go in so many different directions that it's been hard to kind of pin it down and define those things.
I'm just thinking, Kristin was asking about, what are potential ways that we might work together to support each other. If there's a role for a collaboration in this, like an exploratory, okay, you're trying to say, we're trying to set an agenda, a framework for the value of trees and the difficulty of area. If there's an opportunity there for engaging in a conversation surrounding, bringing it to the county and having that conversation as part of county, please let us know. Because I think from my standpoint, SSU is really looking to figure out how can we plug into a larger goal, a county-wide approach or something like that. What is our role relative to everybody else's? So just thinking, I want to put that in your mind. If you're looking
I'm asking similar questions. I mean, part of attending today was trying, like I think what you said from the beginning, Kristin, about knowing that there are many folks working on very similar issues who might not be connecting. How do we become more than the sum of our parts by having these conversations? So I don't know exactly what that looks like, but I'm glad we're thinking about that.
Yeah, and I'll just close here and say that thank you, Claudia. She's the director. I don't think we properly introduced you, but not this week. Okay. But we did get someone in the chat from Mendocino County. I appreciate your comment. They are saying that they'd love to collaborate and that we should consider joining the MCCAAC. Could you type in what that stands for so we could follow up? I'd love to see what that is and see if we can overlap or do some kind of resource sharing with you all. So with that, though, we just have a few minutes left. Carrie?
And with that, I need to jump in, so we're on time.
And thank you, everyone, on behalf of myself. Thank you for coming and participating. And thank you to the panelists. That was I felt a really good conversation and I learned a lot. So thank you.
Truly, so much information. I loved everybody's comments. Thank you to everyone who participated and prepared. You can access today's recording at the same event page where you registered. I'm putting that in the chat. And please share it with others. your colleagues, your friends who might not have been able to come, but might have valuable input. Like has been said, we really do want to make some more collaborations happen based on these events. Our next Building Resilience event is a month from today, Wednesday, February 9th at noon. And that topic will be preparing infrastructure. Kind of a different shift here. So though we have a few panelists in mind, if you or someone you know would like to be included, please do let us know. You can learn more about this event, other public events at the Center for Environmental Inquiry, and live from the field events that are designed for undergraduate classes and faculty at our website. So I'm putting both of those in the chat right now for you. And we also invite you to consider learning to become an Osborne naturalist by participating in our Naturalist Ed Series. It's a new series. It takes place in person, back in person again at Osborne Preserve starting Sunday, January 30th. And you can get there through the link as well. If you have any comments, questions, want to get involved further, please do email me. I will also put my email in the chat, and it was also in your registration email. Have a wonderful week. Again, thank you so much, and we will see you next month.